and welcome to today's webinar on an overview of U.S. visas commonly used in the IT consulting world. Note that we are not lawyers, and none of this is a legal opinion. In today's discussion, we will focus on two main types of non-immigrant visas where most people have questions. These are non-immigrant visas like H1b, L1b, and L1A, and self-sponsored work authorizations like OPT, CPT, and even H4 EAD. For the L1A, the maximum first-time tenure is 7 years. For the L1B, the maximum first-time tenure is shorter, 5 years, while the H1B, the maximum first-time tenure is in between, 6 years. The L1A visa has no minimum wage and education requirement. Neither does the L1B. However, to obtain the H1B, you must hold at least a bachelor's degree. For the L1A visa, your spouse can work. The L1B also permits your spouse to work. However, for the H1B, your spouse cannot work. The L1A is not subject to a cap, nor is the L1B. However, the H1B is subject to a cap. The L1A has no perm requirement for the green card. The L1B, however, needs a perm requirement, as does the H1. Let's first look at the most commonly used visa for guest workers, the H1B. This is an employer-sponsored visa, which means you cannot apply for it or pay for it yourself. You should have at least a bachelor's degree to qualify. USCIS, the U.S. Immigration Authority, has a list of specialty professions that qualify for this category. You should have a provable employer-employee relationship. This means that if you are working for smaller consulting firms, you need paperwork and client letters to prove that this work is legitimate. You can only work in the location specified in the petition. Your employer will have to pay you a continuous wage of whatever is the determination in your H1B labor certificate, except if you are on the leave of absence. Your spouse gets an H4 visa and cannot work in the U.S. These visas are expensive for the employer. The cost is a function of the size of the company and whether you want the decision in 15 days or are willing to wait for 5 months. Total regular cost is between $5,000 and $8,000, including lawyer fees. For premium processing, it is $1,200 extra. H1B visas have an annual cap of $65,000 for regular people and $20,000 visas for people having degrees from U.S. universities. The cap starts on April 1st, and for the last several years, it has been filling up within hours, leading to a lottery system. Nonprofits and educational institutes are usually cap exempt. So are people who have had an H1B before, but did not use the full 6 years. You initially get a 6-year work authorization the first time available in 3-year installments. Unless you have started your green card application, you will need to remain out of the U.S. for 1 year before applying. Next, let's look at the L1B. This is an employer-sponsored visa, which means you cannot pay or apply for it yourself. It is an intra-company transfer. This means that it is employer-specific, and they are transferring you from an overseas location to the U.S. as a specialty worker. Hence, you have to be employed by that company overseas for at least 1 continuous year in the past 3 years. There are no minimum bachelor's educational qualifications required. Your payroll can be run overseas or in the U.S. You cannot transfer to any other employer on this visa. So, if you are thinking of changing jobs, then you should get an H1B visa sponsored by someone. Your spouse gets an L2 visa and can work in the U.S. The cost of this visa is very similar to the H1B. It will cost the employer anywhere between $5,000 to $8,000. The L1B visa has no cap, as you are technically not displacing a U.S. worker. Larger companies that have applied for this visa for at least 10 other persons, or have 1,000 plus employees, or have $25 million or more in revenue, can apply for a blanket L1B, which means that you do not have to send out an application for every individual. You initially get a 5-year work authorization the first time available in 3-year installments. Similar to H1b, you will have to stay out of the US after the 5-year term is over, unless you have applied for a green card. Next, let's look at the L1A. This is a lesser-known visa, but in our opinion, if you are aiming for permanent residence and a faster green card process, this is absolutely your best bet. What's different here from the L1B visa is that you need to be a multinational executive or someone in a senior management position. The cost is very similar to that of the H1b and L1B. And just like an L1B visa, you have no caps in L1A because technically you are an intra-company transfer and are not displacing a US worker. The tenure is different from the L1B visa holder, and you get a 7-year work authorization. The first time available in 3-year, 2-year, and 1-year installments. Let's look at optional practical training, also called OPT, available to people who are in the US as full-time students to work for any relevant employer. First, ask yourself the main questions to check whether you qualify. Are you on current F1 student visa status and have completed at least 1 academic year of F1 status? 2 semesters, some are not included. Have used less than 12 months total of CPT during your degree so far. You qualify for OPT only if your answer to both your questions is a yes. The next criteria is whether you have completed your course already. This is because you can use part-time OPT if you are still studying and want to work for a while. If you have already graduated, then you use the full-time OPT of 12 months. OPT applications typically take 3 months to process, cost $380, and cannot be applied beyond 60 days of graduation. At the same time, you cannot apply for a full-time OPT before 3 months of your expected graduation. You can make good use of OPT because you get it only once for each level of study, like once for undergrad studies, once for grad, etc. Also, if you are a science, engineering, math, or technology student, you get a 17-month extra on top of the allocated 12. The other relatively less used option for students to work is the curricular practical training, also known as the CPT. To check if you qualify, ask yourself the following questions. Are you in current F1 status for 9 months or more? Are you enrolled in a CPT-eligible course? You are not in your final semester. Do you have a letter from your employer with a job in your field of study? If yes, then you can avail of full-time or part-time CPT, as long as you maintain full-time student status. CPT by itself has no bearing without a student visa status. However, be very careful when using it, because if you use more than 12 months of full-time CPT, you end up losing your OPT privilege. And that is something you definitely do not want to lose. Thank you for listening to this webinar. I hope you find it helpful. You can email us to schedule a live demo webinar as well. We offer a variety of information technology courses and interview preparation packages. Thank you once again, and please do have a look at our other videos.